Hi, I'm Renee Tucci, and today we are going to make a pine cone wreath. So many have pine trees in their yard where they will get lots and lots of pine cones from, or of course you could find pine cones at your local florist. But this is a great project to do to create some home decor that will take you from the fall season right through the holiday season and clear into early spring. And at the end of the video, I'll show you a few ways that you can change the wreath each season to keep it seasonal. To begin your wreath, you will need a frame. Today, we're using a 12-inch wire frame. This is what would be referred to as the inner diameter of the wreath. Of course, our pine cones are going to come off of this frame, and that will dictate our outer diameter. Now, when you're working with a wreath frame, of course, you'll need your materials that you're going to put on it, and then whatever attachment mechanism that you're going to use. So today, we're going to use a 20 gauge wire. As you can see, this is coming off of a spool. You can also find this wire that comes on a paddle. So today for our wreath, we're actually going to be working with two different sizes of pine cones. And so I've got a larger size and a smaller size. We're going to put the smaller size aside. That's going to be for our second layer. And we're going to do our first layer on the frame with just the larger size. Now, I've decided that I want the bottom of my pine cone to be on the inside of the wreath. So each pine cone that I lay down, I'm going to make sure that that is the case. You could, of course, alternate them if you wanted, or you could reverse the course, but this is how I'm going to do it today. And so I take my spool wire and I lay the pine cone against the frame. And to get it started, I'm just going to wrap the wire around and sort of feed it through the teeth of the pine cone till I find my original tail and twist. Once I've got the first pine cone on the frame and I've got the wire squared away, I'm going to pull the wire up just sort of parallel next to that first pine cone, and we're going to lay the second one right next to it so that the bottom lines up with the first one. Then I'll take the wire, run it through the teeth of the second pine cone, and wrap it around the frame again. This time we'll come back up and basically we're wrapping it twice, getting the wire in position for the next pine cone. Now you'll just continue with this pattern all the way around. Sometimes your pine cones will have a natural curve to them. Make sure you pay attention to that, and if you have one with a curve, perhaps the next one may also have a curve and they lay against each other. This will create a pleasing pattern. As you're going around your wreath base, you will have to pull into the pine cones a bit and you will hear some crunching, but don't worry, most of the pine cone will still be intact, so no one will be able to notice if you've chipped away at any of them. Also be sure that you're pulling your wire hard enough so you get a really good grip on that frame underneath. Now once you've finished your first layer, we're going to add a second layer, and that's where the smaller pine cones come into play. So before you start going, you'll want to grade out your cones and make sure you have the two different sizes set aside. So we'll take our smaller layer, and we'll lay it right on top of the first, between two of the larger, and we're just going to run the wire down and feed it through the lower layer as best we can. Sometimes it takes some shifting and finagling through the teeth of the pine cone. Back up, and again, we'll add in our second. Once you get to your last pine cone, we'll go ahead and attach that as we have the others, wrapping it down and around. Then, using wire cutters, trim the wire from the spool, flip it over, and wrap the wire around the frame to end it. Now we have both layers of the pine cones on, and I think this wreath is beautiful just like this. You could hang this and it would be done, but let's add a little more to it. So we're going to do that by first adding a bow. For this particular bow, I've decided to use two different materials to layer them together for some excitement. So I've got this wider black and white check pattern. This width of ribbon is called a number 40. And then I've got this thinner version of a burlap ribbon. Both of them are wired. So there's a wire running down each side of the ribbon, which makes it easier to get that nice classic loop that you always see in bows. Now I'm going to use less of the checked ribbon. So this is actually 27 inches of ribbon. And I want to make a center loop for my bow. So I'm going to do that by taking the bow and wrapping it back on itself just until I feel like that's going to be a good size for my center loop. Then once I get that back to the center, I'm going to twist the ribbon. Number one reason to do that is because it gives you a really nice pucker there in the center. And then also it gives you some volume to hold on to in the center. Now I'm right-handed, so I'm going to hold all the parts of my bow in my left hand. So this hand only opens and closes to let in more ribbon. It doesn't let go. So now we'll take this tail and we'll run it down and back to the center. And we can adjust that as we do it until we're happy with the size of the loop. And I think that is a good size for my first loop. I'll twist it again to give myself some volume to hold on to in the center here, and then I'll run it back down the other side and back to the center and twist again. Now let's add in our second ribbon. So this is a burlap ribbon and this is 66 inches of ribbon. So I'm going to take the tail and I'm going to tuck it into the body that we're working with here, and I'll tuck it just far enough so I have a little bit of tail here, so I'm sure it's not going to slip out, but not so long that it's going to protrude into the decorative part of the bow. And again, always give a twist right there in the center, and I'm holding this really firmly to make sure nothing wants to slip. So same technique, run it down and back to the center. Now, as you make your loops, progressively each loop should get a little bit larger. That's how you'll get that nice fanned out classic bow shape. So a little bit longer, and then also, if you can see, I have it on a bit of a different plane. So if this is center, I have this a little bit askew, and then my next one will be a little bit of skew so that I get a nice fan going. So once I decide I'm happy with my length of my loop, bring it back to center, twist, out, back to center, twist. This technique does take some getting used to, so please don't get frustrated if you don't get it on the first try. But it's just a sort of a rhythm that you get into, out and back, twisting each time. So now I've got my first set of burlap loops, I'm going to do my second set, and this time again I'm going on a bit of a different plane, twist, back down here, twist, here, and then the third one over here. So now you can see I have 4 loops on each side plus my center loop, and I've got a nice fan going here. I'm not worried about it being perfect because it will shuffle a little bit when I put the wire in, and that's no problem. I can just fan it out again. So I've got a 20 gauge wire here. This is an 18-inch piece of 20 gauge wire, and I'm going to slide this through the center loop until it gets about halfway, and then I fold the wires down so that they're parallel, being very careful not to let go of that bundle I have in the center. And then I'll pull the sides of the wires and twist, making sure that I get any little tails and really get them tightly contained in that twist so that nothing wants to slip out. Once you've got that twisted 2 or 3 times really firmly, at this point you can start to play with the loops and see how they're laying and twisting them and puffing them out as you wish. Again, once you get it on your wreath, you'll need to do that again, so don't worry about it being too perfect at this point. Okay, so now we need to add this to our wreath. So let's look at our wreath and give it a spin. There's no up or down, right or wrong way, but I think I want to put my bow right here. I actually have a little gap here between my pine cones. I'm not sure how that happened, but we're going to cover it with our bow. So I'm going to take the 2 legs from my bow, my wire legs, and I'm going to feed them through the structure. And this might take a little shuffling to get them through. Make sure that you're feeding one leg through a different area of the other leg so that when you get it to the back and you twist, there's something to hold on to and you're not just entering into an empty area. So now I'm going to push this as far as I can so that it's nestled up against the pine cones, but I don't want to pull it so far that it starts to cave in. That's not a good look. So we'll keep it out a little bit and then twist. Twist your wires 2 or 3, maybe even 4 times just to make sure it's really on there. Now, I recommend using these wires to create the hook for your wreath. When you do that, your wreath will always hang centered. Your bow will always be centered. So if you take your wires, run them together, make a loop, and back down on itself, and then twist, that will make a great hook for your wreath. So once you have your bow on your wreath, like I said, you can fuss with the ribbon and make sure that it looks good. So don't be afraid to tug at it because you've done a good job of twisting your wires. And move the loops until you're happy with how they're layered together. Okay, now I want to add some more ribbon to this. I think it will just take it up to the next level. So I'm going to layer the 2 ribbons. I'll take my wider black and white check and I'm going to layer my more narrow burlap with it. And I'm going to take the ends and and scrunch them up, maybe even twist them so that I have some body to wire here. Now I'm going to take an 18-inch piece of 24 gauge wire. This is a little more narrow than what we used to make our hook, and I'm just going to wrap that around our ribbons just to combine them, and also to give me legs to wrap around the wreath now. We're going to attach this just behind and under our bow to make it seem as though it's seamless from bow to streamer. Once you get your wires to the back, give them a few twists, and then trim the excess with some wire cutters. If you have needle nose pliers, you can use them to tuck the wire back up into the pine cones, or you can just push it up in, but you want to make sure that that sharp edge disappears into the wreath so that you don't accidentally poke yourself next time you pick it up. Okay, so we're going to leave the ribbons attached to their bolts at this point, but we need to give ourselves some room to pull the slack. And what I want to do is actually take this around the wreath and tack it in all the way around. So I'm going to look at it and play with the direction of the ribbon. And I think I'll do 3 tacks. So basically north, east, south, and west as best I can between the pine cones. We want it to come out a little bit. And I think that's going to be a nice point. So I'll take another 24 gauge wire, run it around the ribbons, twist, and feed those wires through the frame. Okay, now we'll travel down and we'll do the same thing at the south point and the west point. Once you have roughly eyeballed the amount of ribbon that you'll need to get it back up to the top, you can cut it free from the bolts. Give yourself a little extra just in case. And line those up just as we did the other points. And again, to finish just behind the bow so that it looks seamless. At this point, if you've given yourself any excess, you can go ahead and trim that. Otherwise, it will get in the way in the bow area. Once you've gotten all your points connected, go ahead and trim your wires in the back. Remember to tuck away any wire edges that might poke you later. Once you've gotten your north, south, east, and west points pinned in, you can also go ahead and pin between those points to increase your puckers and your ribbon loops. So I'll do that here on this last spot. Take your 24 gauge wire, wrap it around the ribbon, give it a little twist, and then feed those legs through. Now once you're done wiring your loops into place, just take your wire cutters and trim off any excess wire that's on the back of the wreath. Tuck away any little sharp edges that may be pointed out. Now, just so you know, for review, in case you would like to change the ribbon, which you can do now or you can do seasonally. This checked ribbon, this is about a little less than 2 yards on the entire wreath. And this ribbon in florist speak is a number 40, but it's also 2 3/4 inches wide. For the burlap ribbon, we have about 3 yards on this ribbon, and we have about 3 yards on this wreath, and it is 1.5 inches wide, or number 9 in floral speak. So I think this is really beautiful just as is, but if you wanted to, you could change it out seasonally and take it from fall through winter and even into early spring. Some ways that you could do that are you could take some silk leaves and you could wire these or even hot glue these in around the bow. If you'd like, that would be really pretty and add some nice color to the look. Heading into the winter season, you could take some silk pine needles and add those in. You could also take fresh boxwood, which dries really beautifully. And again, you could wire this or glue this in all around the wreath. If you glue it in, make sure that your glue is making contact with the cones, and then when you're ready to pluck it out, you can either cut it out or just yank and it should come out. So you can see how adding that green really changes the look and warms it up. And then as we move through winter and into early spring, you could even add some of the really on-trend and popular dried materials, which are just everywhere right now. So these are preserved bunny tails, and they would look really great if they were added in around the wreath as well. So just hot glue or wire those in. I hope you've learned some tips and techniques in creating a pine cone wreath and that you enjoy making it. Thanks a lot.